jeweller's shop, I think in Leeds, and grew that to be the largest family law firm in the country. I think she's the only panellist here who's regularly appeared on This Morning, unless anyone can correct me. But I think there's a serious point amongst Marilyn's many strengths. Marketing a firm and getting out there and making law accessible is one of those. Then next up, we have Darryl Cook, partner at Gunnar Cook. Now, I'd like to say my greatest achievements and learnings had come in the pub, but that would be a lie. But Darryl, I think, achieved his dream of setting up a pub and
say it was successful.
well, I said you learnt a lot. Yeah, so I'll be interested to hear about that, but also here's a really interesting background as a barrister, writing books, and also set up a really interesting firm in Gunnar Cook who do some quite different things in how they run themselves. And then finally, at the end, we've got Chris Gorst, Head of Better Markets at Nesta Challenges. It seems like you have to be called Chris to work on the Legal Access Challenge, because those are the two guys who are running it. I think, Chris, you're originally from Birmingham, and his background is in investment banking and the Treasury. I'm pleased you're alive here today, because Chris told me previously that he likes to cycle around London with his headphones on listening to podcasts, which means he's a braver man than me. But Chris is helping lead on our Legal Access Challenge. So let me talk about how the format of this session is going to work. I'm going to give each panellist just a couple of minutes to say a few words about what innovation means to them and a bit of their experience. Apologies if I interrupt you after 3 minutes, just so we keep things moving, because what I want to do is get on to questions quickly. I'll have some questions, but this will be way more interesting if we get questions from you guys out there. So start thinking of your questions. We'll get a microphone to you and see what our panel has said. So without further ado, shall we head along the line? Jeremy, do you want to kick off? What does innovation mean to you?
Hello, everyone. Thanks very much for having me. The train ride was thankfully on time. So innovation means to me, it's an interesting topic because it's so broad. It's very difficult to define. There's kind of, in my view, I've got three ways of looking at it. One is kind of academically, so you can break it down into its constituent parts. You can innovate process, you can innovate business model, and ultimately the common thread through all of those things is something has changed in legal. You can make a lot of small changes, or you can make one big change, and I think the panelists here are probably really good to speak to the larger changes. I think for Norton Rose Fulbright, we probably look at innovation more in the practical sense, much more about the small incremental changes that we can make. I was very fortunate to be part of one of the larger, smaller changes that we made, following in the footsteps of many of our peer firms, setting up the Newcastle hub, but in many respects running it like a startup. Probably the third way, and one that I'm going to borrow but credit to a startup incubator in London called Lexel. I really like the way they define innovation as being the art and science of solving problems that matter, which I'll leave you to kind of parse that.
I think that is just the test again. Or it's me, whenever a speaker goes on too long, I'm pressing a button, but you certainly didn't go on too long. So thank you for that introduction. Carl, what about you? What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, delighted to be in Birmingham. I read law at Birmingham. I had the fantastic time because we only had 4 hours of lectures a week. It was brilliant. Luckily, to the relief of all my professors and lecturers, I didn't actually qualify afterwards. I got the degree. So it's great to be back in Birmingham. I think innovation, as you quite rightly say, it's a word that has multiple meanings, and with so many different people in the room, we'd end up with many, many different interpretations of it. So innovation itself as a concept is actually quite hard to get your mind around. I think you described it really well in terms of the way to approach it. The way we always looked at it within the organisations that we've been involved in, and that's not just in legal but in other sectors, is we tended to judge it in 4 ways in terms of making change and working out whether it was actually innovation or not in that context. So first of all, we'll look at it in the context of our organisation. Does it make a difference? The thing that we're seeking to do, does it make a difference in the context of our organisation? That doesn't mean it's innovative, but actually, in terms of what we do, the way we deliver our services, the way we recruit and retain people, the way we use data, the way we interact with customers, how does it change the way we are doing things? Okay, so now let's see whether it's innovative. How does that compare with what's happening in the industry? So if the first level is our organisation, the second level is well, what's happening in our industry? Because we could be doing something very, very significant internally for us, but actually it's been done by the rest of the sector for the last 25 years, and therefore it's clearly not going to be qualifying as innovative. So I think judging what you're doing in the context of your industry is really important. Actually, if you really wanted to be innovative, that's still not good enough, because you've got to look at it in the context of other industries. I was fascinated with the list that you referenced, Chris, at the front end. And let me not seek to be devil's advocate, but a lot of the things you described have been going on in every other sector for the last 30 years. So a lot of the things that are now happening in legal, it's happened in every other sector over the last 3-4 decades. So flexible work in the use of technology, the application of data, all of these things have happened elsewhere. Legal is just late to the party. The good news is that creates great opportunities, by the way. So we tiered it in, first of all, our organisation, secondly, our industry, thirdly, other industries and trends, what's out there that we could apply and bring in. And of course, the key to everything, absolutely the key to everything, the fourth tier, customers. Everything comes back to the customer. All roads lead to the customer. And what was fascinating in that environment is actually most of the best things we ever did over the last 25, 30 years in different sectors came from conversations with customers and listening to them and understanding what was going to make a difference to satisfying their needs, their objectives. So that's the way we approached it.
Thank you, that's great, Carl. Marilyn, customer, what are your thoughts?
Well, if you'd have said to me in 1982 that opening my firm in what I thought was the equivalent of LA Law in East Leeds in a converted cobbler's shop, but it was interiorly done beautifully, that I would end up how I ended up with a multi-million-pound sale of my firm, I'd never have believed you. But what happened to me was I identified my market. I identified the field of law that I wanted to work in, and I made damn sure that I was extremely good in my field. I also made extremely sure that my customer, my client, was happy. And I've had a lot of good fortune during my career. I started off when women were quite rare in the law. And so lots of women started to come to me as the woman lawyer in Leeds. And I saw and identified a need in the market and thought to myself, how do I do it? Making people feel comfortable. I gave an interview to the Times on the sale of the firm where I said that actually I'd sat in Betty's tea rooms in Harrogate, and I don't know if you've ever been to Betty's in Harrogate, but it's a really comfy tea room. It's beautifully decorated, but in a comfortable way where everybody feels just right. And I copied it, and I replicated that all through the country, and it worked. And I used PR. I used PR as much as I could. I was one of the first solicitors in 1990 when the Law Society relaxed its rules to actually ring up a PR firm and say, can you make me famous? And they said, well, we'll give it a go. And I started to write for the Yorkshire Post, and from the Yorkshire Post I got a series in the Daily Express because they asked for a photo and I sent it in with me wearing a Ralph Lauren dress, and they rang me up and said, you're from Leeds and you're wearing Ralph Lauren. And I got that series just by wearing, and from there it led to other things. It led to radio, it led to TV. I did become the family lawyer for This Morning, and that was very interesting. But I used things to my advantage. I didn't go for the glory, glory, hallelujah thing. I didn't go in for rewards. I went for things that I thought would impress a customer, the consumer, the client. And the important thing to me wasn't money. It was having a satisfied client walk out the door at the end of the case and say, she did me a good job. And from that, your reputation grows, your firm grows, and you prosper from it. Going for money isn't the way to succeed.
Thank you, that was really interesting. Thank you, Marilyn. Daryl, do you want to share your thoughts?
Yeah, probably like many of you, when I started out, I was very passionate about law and about the service and what I could achieve. And I kind of remember, actually this is probably, the first few years I wanted to be a footballer, but when I decided I couldn't achieve that, then I really wanted to be a lawyer. And I do remember going to university, and I just thought it was the most wonderful time at university, you know, staying up late, having conversation at kitchen tables, drinking very cheap plum but actually at the time as well, I really wanted to serve, and I joined the free representation units, the citizens advice bureaus, etc. And that was what really drove me to be a lawyer. And but then I went into London and I joined, after, first I went to become the bar, and then I went into industry. But I joined a traditional city firm. And I soon realized that my life completely changed. I no longer was in control of my life. So at 10, 11 o'clock at night, I was still in the office on a regular, all the time. I couldn't organize things. I couldn't play football in the evenings. I couldn't arrange the theatre because I was in the office the whole time. And I think, and that's continued. And actually, it's got worse. So when I started out, you did about 1350 hours a year. The big law firms now, you tend to do 1750. A lot of them will ask to do over 2,000 hours. Some of the US law firms are asking you to do 3,000 hours, plus pro bono, plus business development. So they completely control these young lawyers' lives. They call it beasting in London. It's a terrible phrase, but that's what they do. They take over control of them. And I decided it just wasn't the right way to treat lawyers. And I think law firms really do need to change and look at themselves. So in 2010, we set up a very different style law firm. The lawyers in the firm completely design their own lives. They don't have a regular salary. They take a share from the fees. But that means they can decide if they want to work Mondays or don't want to work Mondays. They can decide if they want to work to their 80. They can decide if they want to take 2 months off in the summer. And that control of their lives gives them their happiness back because they design their own lives. The addition to that, which was really positive, is that 95% of them earn more than they did previously. And over 50% will earn 2 to 3 times that they did previously. So it's a completely different style. It's now grown. There's over 200 partners. There's 45 management consultants in it. There's a coaching business. There's a very large charity in it, and there's a young law firm. What we really wanted to do, though, the why we exist, was to give control back to lawyers over their own lives.
Thank you, fascinating, Darryl. And finally, Chris.
Just to issue a correction, I actually grew up in Solihull, and I'm never quite sure whether that counts as Birmingham, so just to clarify that point. So I work for Nesta. We're an innovation foundation. We're actually a charity ourselves, and we exist to stimulate and support innovation for public good. So we're not kind of gung-ho for innovation in all its forms. We're specifically interested in innovation where it's solving problems or meeting real needs. I don't have a catch-all definition of innovation for you, unfortunately, in spite of working for an innovation foundation. But I'd echo what Carl was saying, actually. I think it's helpful to think about innovation at different levels. You know, we can innovate as individuals. The organizations we work for can innovate. Our sectors that we work in can innovate. And then you can think about innovation at an economy or even kind of global economy level as well. And the higher up that stack you get, the less linear, the more complex and frankly more bewildering the innovation process and innovation ecosystem is. But a kind of couple of observations. One is that innovation tends to find a way of filtering down from that highest level in terms of technological developments to how it affects sectors and firms and us as individuals. You can see that through the way the internet over the past 25 years has affected most areas of our lives and our working lives. And another observation is that the kind of innovation you see, or I guess to some extent also the amount of innovation you see at any of those levels, can be quite a helpful bellwether for the kind of health of the system. I think that's true at the individual level. If you don't feel free or able to innovate in your working life, you probably end up feeling quite stymied. I think you can look at that at all levels of this system as well. And I think in legal services, the picture is probably a bit mixed. You are seeing kind of pockets of innovative practice kind of bubbling up, but we haven't necessarily seen yet some of the kind of breakthrough innovations that are really helping to widen access to high quality legal services for the kind of broad mass of consumers and small businesses out there. So that's why we're excited to be running the Legal Access Challenge together with the SRA, which we're really looking to you to come forward with the ideas that you want to pursue that could change the way legal services are experienced by consumers and small businesses, and that could serve to widen access to legal services much more broadly. So please do catch up with me later if you have a minute.
Thank you, Chris. So I'm going to kick off with one question and then we're going to go out to the floor. But I suppose building on all those thoughts, so what will the legal sector of tomorrow look like? How different is it going to be and how quickly is that going to happen? Is it going to be all robot lawyers and completely different models, or is it going to look quite similar to now? Anyone want to kick off on that one? Marilyn?
I can't see an end to the demand for a personal lawyer in my field, in family law, because a person who requires family law advice is very usually, I'd say almost without exception, is distressed, is emotional, is quite confused, can't see a pathway through, is foggy. They will always need a lawyer and there will always be a demand for high street lawyers, in my view. I think that what lawyers have to do is look at how they provide a high quality service in an area where there's no longer legal aid. In my firm, when legal aid ended, we still provided pro bono advice every single day from every single office. I thought that was extremely important. And it was a good marketing tool as well, because the public could see that not only were we charging clients, but we were also prepared to provide pro bono advice as well. And I think for two reasons it was a good thing to do. But you've got to work out how you do it, how you provide the best quality advice at a reasonable price that the public can afford. And there's all sorts of ways. And one way I thought, just as I was leaving the firm, and I wrote an article for this for Family Law, was how about providing one lawyer for one couple? And that is quite innovative. But so many times, and I'm sure any family lawyers here will know this, people ring up and say, well, I want you to act for both of us. We both want you, but we can't both have you. Can't you advise both of us? And as an arbitrator and as a mediator, I can deal with two people. I can't honestly see a reason why one lawyer can't objectively advise a couple sitting with them, keep the costs down, perhaps even legal aid could be made available for such a service. And that, I think, could be a way forward, but there'd have to be changes, regulatory changes, there might need to be legal changes, I'm not sure. But, you know, it's a case of, yes, there will always be a demand. How do you provide the best quality, best possible? And from that, you will get more work.
Thank you. Interesting. Anyone else want to add on that, Daryl?
I think just, sorry, I've been given a handheld, I thought I was being asked to sing or something when I was given this, but I've been given a handheld microphone. I completely agree with that, and I think it actually plays into your hands, actually. I don't think you should be frightened of AI as it comes along. I think you should, but what you first of all have to do is look to your clients. And I think there is definitely a real need for that real personal, trusted advisor service, which is what a lot of clients want. And I think that is directly plays into your hands. That will always be there. I think what we need to do is become even more obsessive with client service. I think as we look around now, large businesses have improved client services. I think Apple has improved client services. You compare the service from Apple to to the Main Street banks, you see the difference in the quality of service that you get. And I think that is what you should become obsessed with, is client service. And I do think that has been a real weakness in the law over years and years. I think that
Why do you think that's the case?
because I think we focus so much on technical skills, right, through law school and training. We focus so much on the teaching of technical skills. And actually, and the client just expects that. It's there, they expect that from you. What really makes a difference is the wow factor, is the service that you provide. And that's what you really need to focus on. And if AI will help you, then you need to look at that and buy in whatever service you need to do. But most of all, you need to start with the service that you give to your clients.
Additional thoughts on that, Chris?
I think we get a bit stuck on whether technology is going to remove the need for lawyers. It's not a case of either or, technology or human lawyers. It's much more about both and I think actually the sector might helpfully look at what's going on in the healthcare sector, where there's people are really thinking hard about how technology complements the expertise of doctors and medical practitioners. But I do think, as I was saying at the start, there's a certain irresistible force to innovation, and over the past 10 years or so, there have been some pretty significant advances in machine learning, the ability of machines to interpret visual and written information, and that's probably not going to slow down. And what that means is there probably are parts of the work that maybe solicitors currently do that are going to become less relevant, but that potentially frees them up to really add value where they can, which I think would be a good news for the sector and good news for the many consumers and small businesses who currently can't access legal services.
Any further thoughts on that before we go out to the floor? Carl?
So the good news is that the market's going to be bigger. There's going to be more demand. The challenging news is there's going to be more competition. And the opportunity, therefore, it goes to where you started with. I think everyone's got to work out what business are you in and focus accordingly. So it depends where you're sitting in the marketplace. So going from global organizations through to the high streets, what's going to actually determine success? Brand and reputation is going to be important. Quality of service delivery is going to be important. The way you do use technology to deliver and support your service. In some cases, it will be self-service. In some cases, it will be technology supporting you as you deliver that service. And you're right, you don't get away from the human interaction. What you do, though, is change the frequency and nature of that human interaction depending on the work. So I think the things that are going to be clearly obvious are brand, technology, data, service, and actually addressing the key question, whether you're in a high street or whether you're in a large law firm, whether you're in-house, and I hate the phrase in-house because that, if you think about it, that defines an in-house legal function against third-party law firms. You don't hear of an in-house sales team or an in-house finance team. So I think we've got some interesting language challenges in this marketplace. So I think the key is going to be going back to fundamental basics. What business are you in? What will customers buy from you? How can you deliver those things cost effectively and to a high quality? And how does that differentiate you against your competitors? Because the market's going to grow, but it's going to be far more competitive, which is good news for the customer.
Any additional thoughts on that, Jeremy?
No, I agree with all of that. I think some interesting points that came out of here. One, skills. The skills that are going to be required to, I think, operate in 10 years are very almost non-existent at the moment. So we have to be thinking very carefully about how are we recruiting, what skills are we teaching students in law school, and what additional training are we providing our junior lawyers at the moment to help them to embrace what will be a very different future. I think augmentation is the real key word here. It's lawyers doing way more work than they've ever been able to do, augmented by tech. I think one word of caution, anyone who is in a legal, or anyone who has in their legal, I suppose the majority of their work is process-based, that is repetitive. That is the kind of stuff that machines can do. So we need to look kind of up the value chain when we're doing that type of work. And so that's skills. The other thing is around the trusted advisor. What does it take to be a trusted advisor? I think kind of the smaller firms and even high street firms have a much better grasp really on what it means to be a trusted advisor than perhaps some of the larger city firms. And that means that you have complementary understanding and skill sets, and that could come in the form of deep knowledge about your client's business or personal affairs. You most likely have a stronger relationship with your clients. And that trusted advisor means that you're doing a lot more than just legal, right? You're helping them in many, many respects. And I think this is a realization for big law. To get into the trusted advisor space, they need to be doing a lot more than just being lawyers. The third bit is data. And I cannot overstate. We've seen what data has been able to do for well, the world's 10 largest businesses are data companies. I mean, that's enough said there. Large law firms are at a disadvantage because they have too much. They don't know how to organize it. I think smaller, medium-sized firms could potentially have the ability to leverage their data much quicker. There are tools that are coming on the market that already exist. Some that already exist that do some very impressive things with relatively unstructured or completely unstructured data sets. And the price points are coming down every day. And for smaller firms or for new practices, if you start with a data strategy from day one, you will be years ahead of your competitors. So, anyway.
Well, Max, have you got something to add on that, Carl? Sorry.
I was just going to add, I think this is a fantastic time to be alive. I wish I was 25 again and starting a business from scratch again. Yeah, because if you think about it, you can now create from your bedroom a local, regional, national, global player. And that is what is very, very exciting, because you can leverage the skills that you've got in an entirely different way. So I think what's fascinating, this is a fantastic time to actually be alive. As long as you start from a blank piece of paper and think about, well, if I was starting again, what business would replace mine? Because that's where you should be migrating to. What's the business that's going to make you redundant and actually create that business yourself? And innovation is not just about, I know everyone will agree this, innovation is not just about technology. I love the Betters example, because that was innovative in a very creative way, and it wasn't to do with technology. And technology is not everything. The way you recruit people, the way you use data to actually report to people, the way you greet people, these are the things that make a difference to an organisation.
So a couple, I want to get, can I just see, we'll just come to you quickly, Daryl, and then we'll try and get out to the audience on some questions.
I clearly agree with all that, but I actually think the biggest challenge is not AI, but it is culture. Because culture has to embrace the technology. I mean, I remember years ago working in industry, and the FD used to say, the IT department can come to me and say, I need to spend £1 million on IT, and he said, who am I to challenge it? It was just like a black hole to him. And I think I've been at so many law firms, I've seen really good CRM systems introduced and completely fail because the culture hasn't embraced the system. So I think it is about culture, not being frightened of technology, and then embracing it and bringing it into the culture.
Real quick quote from you, Marilyn, and then we'll get out to the floor.
One quick thing I'd like to add. I think the trick of running a successful law firm, though, is running it also as a business and getting the balance between law firm and business correct. And my accountant in 1982 said to me, Marilyn, expenses kill profits. And it's true. And you've got to weigh up how you spend on your firm in order to further your business and not spend so wildly that you don't make a decent profit. You've got to do both together in tandem. And that's the trick. That's the hard bit.
Okay, let's move out to the floor. Could you raise your hand if you have a question? We've got microphones. We've got the woman in the purpley dress there. Thank you.
Hi, thank you. Sue Hatton. My question is for Jeremy. You said that skills currently are almost non-existent. Could you define what those skills are, please?
Yeah, definitely. So an ability to translate, I think, is probably the overriding way I would describe it. If you have the ability to, or the desire or the ambition as a young person to understand technology, but also be a lawyer, you have just created an entirely new career for yourself. We have a team of people in our Newcastle office who are doing both, but what is lacking are the hard skills. So people that actually understand how to structure data, for example. People that understand how to write very simple code, not difficult at all, but code that actually allows them to be much more efficient as individuals. They're essentially, like, I guess we look at a lot of the tasks that our lawyers do, and many of them are process. There's no law going on, it's administrative work, but it's something that helps to service, I suppose, a larger body of advice. And if you as an individual or as a student right now have the ability to learn some very basic functions to help speed that up, I mean, that's just one small example. AI, there's lots and lots and lots of different kinds of it. Even just having a basic understanding of what the different kinds are and what they do, you can probably see through a lot of the hype, which would be very beneficial. But ultimately it comes down to being that translator. It's no longer, I believe, acceptable to be a single domain expert. You must be at least 2 or more.
And we've got the woman here with the flamingos, I think, on her dress.
Yes, indeed, they are flamingos. Hello, Nicola Jones. Hi, Marilyn. Can't see you around the post. I'm struck by the fact that everybody on the panel is either set up their own business or, in the case of Jeremy, working in a hub, which is a separate entity, I assume. And you're in startup phase. And it's a real massive challenge for established law firms to turn the ship. It's like turning a tanker, isn't it? And it's all very well for you to go whizzing past on your little light yachts and say, look, come and join us, it's great out here. And other people are trying to wrangle the change. I'm a continuous learning expert. If I'm lucky, I get an enlightened managing partner, and we can work together and try and create energy. But the amount of investment of time and money that's needed to change mindsets is daunting in the extreme, I think, for most firms. And I just wonder, Jeremy, you were talking there about hard skills. Marilyn, you mentioned purpose earlier. These are things that are, that we can sort of sort those out, but the mindset change and the opportunity, as you say, Carl, to leapfrog 20, 30 years of change rhetoric, most of which is just that, and actually get to the point where people are able to change behaviour, have permission to be all that they are, because there's so much talent in every law firm. It's a massive thing, isn't it, to free up? And I wonder what advice you would give to law firms here to say, look, this is where this is how you can make a start on that journey to change these mindsets and have permission to use all the talent in the room.
It's a great point. So how does it work for the established law firm? Is anyone want to start on that point?
I think it's a terrific question, actually, and I think it goes right to the nub of it. And I think the legal services, we do have a challenge because we're always looking from within. And I think the point that Carl made about lots of these things have been going on outside the legal industry for years and years is really relevant. In a large law firm, in fact, in pretty much every law firm, you might be a litigator on a Friday evening, or a tax lawyer, or a corporate lawyer, and on Monday morning you're suddenly running a 150 million pound business, and you're expected to be a leader and to acquire all the business skills that you need to do that. And that just is wrong, because actually what you do, you perpetuate the issue. You then do the same thing that everybody else has done, and you never learn from outside. To bring real innovation in, I think quite often you just need to go outside and bring people in to help to lead on that, and either lead the firm and create leadership within the firm. And some of the larger law firms now, I'm quite impressed, are actually doing that. I mean, I remember when I was at some of the big firms, and we used to constantly have this debate about bringing someone outside, and we used to say, oh no, but they don't understand partners, they don't understand the law, which is nonsense. It's a very, very simple industry. And I think bringing people in from outside to manage the law firms and lead them is a key factor. But if you're not doing that, then there are lots of people who can help you and support you. And the leader of the firm, leadership is everything. And if you don't bring people with you, you're just going for a walk. So you've got to bring people with you. And that is about you stepping up and being a leader. And that's about learning those skills, reading about those skills, practicing those skills, and implementing them in the firm.
Anyone else got any further thoughts to add on that question, Marilyn?
I think that personally, so far as I was concerned, I did start off working for two larger firms, and I decided actually I wouldn't be happy working in either of them. So my decision to go and branch off and start my LA law was my decision because I fancied doing it, and I decided that's what I was going to do. And it was just a small office, but that was what I was going to do. I think it's very, very important to be very passionate and to be very happy in your job. And if you're not passionate about your job and you're not happy in your job, look for something where you will be happy and you will be passionate. But during the recession, that's when I think I saw some law firms collapse and some law firms ride it out and then improve. And in particular, I've got one friend whose firm, clearly can't say who they are, were on the verge of complete collapse. And now they are flying, and they're flying because they actually decided to go for different markets. They merged with a few other firms, and they're now going global. And I have such admiration for them because they are passionate. They were clearly passionate about their firm. And they were on the floor and they just said, well, how do we survive? And, they've done it, and they're doing it in areas where they really want to be. So I think job satisfaction is key to everything. And if you're not happy, move on.
Carl?
Yeah, I think it's a perfect segue because I was going to say two things. One, you need a burning platform. That was a burning platform. And by the way, if you're a good leader, if there isn't a burning platform, create a burning platform. Because the way you drive change, it's interesting because it's about behavior, it's about leadership, it's about all of those elements. But there's a reality. It's not easy, it's very, very hard. People have to have a reason to change. And creating a burning platform, if there isn't one, is actually the best way to do it we've ever seen. Now, there is something else, but this requires, this does go to the heart of leadership. It's benevolent dictatorship. And the reason those two words are important together is because actually, you know, you can lead and try and take people with you. There comes a point where you say, we're going there. And by the way, if you don't want to stay on this bus, it's time you found another one. So you took a decision to get off. If you're driving an organization and you know what, most of you in this room will know what the future looks like and where you need to get to. How you get there is a very difficult process to do it. There'll be some people who you will, whatever you do, you will not take them with you. And you just have to be open about that. So I think the combination of a burning platform and benevolent dictatorship is a really good way to achieve it.
I want to give the opportunity for more questions as I hear music carefully playing in the background.
That was ELO, another great
Birmingham band, yeah, yes. So, any further questions from the floor? Yes, this woman with the sunglasses on at the front.
We need a microphone.
Yes, if you just get a microphone over to, it helps with the stream as well, so the world can hear what you're asking.
The millions.
Yeah, the millions that I've decided are watching.
We hear a lot about, the legal sector operating as a business. It needs to operate as a business. So my question really is why, in legal education, we don't put business training as part of the legal training, because with these young people, if they actually understood how a law practice functioned from a business point of view, we would make the cultural shift a lot easier, I think, for the people that are operating those businesses.
Mm-hmm. Any thoughts on that? Is that a good idea, that business training should be part of the academic training, so to speak?
One word?
Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely, it should.
I think it's a good point as well, and I agree. I think the university, I look at the university's 3 years, and we have a real opportunity with young people to create better people, to create business people, and you're right, it's wasted. It completely needs re-looking at. But I also think you need to look at the law firms as well and how we train people. They really do look at good technical training, and that's what they're very strong at. When lawyers join us, we have a 7-part journey before they join, which they go through a process to join. It's not just a business plan. We have what's called a VTO, which is an action plan from their business plan. And then we have a check-in for 6 weeks, and then we have a coaching program. And the first session that we have with them, we say, you're no longer a lawyer, you're a lawyer and a business person. We have a value in the business which we call nudge, which we say we put fruit at eye level, but we don't ban junk food. But we surround them with business skills and business thinking and business knowledge, because you're absolutely right. That's what they are at the end of the day.
I think that it's a very, very important point, which is that the legal education infrastructure is not training people for the world of work today, let alone the world of work that's emerging. I think one of the great things, if you actually put business studies as part of, and business studies rather than law firm, business studies as part of a legal education, one of the great things to watch would be young people coming into a law firm. So explain to me, why at the end of every year do we distribute all the profits to the partners and therefore we can't invest in the future like every other business in the world in every other sector? Right, so I think it would be a fascinating thing to watch as a fly on the wall. That would be a great case study.
So you think it's a dysfunctional model, which I add on. So is the traditional law firm partnership model doomed, or is there still a place for that?
Well, speaking as the sole owner of the law firm that I worked in, there was no way that I could draw the money out, because if I did that, I wouldn't have a firm.
But so you run it as a business.
It's a business. Yeah. I came from a business family. My father was a wholesaler, a retailer, and a manufacturer all in one. And actually, when I was doing my articles, as they were then called, I used to go from my law firm and sit and join my dad for lunch and his business partner, and I learned more from them I rang about what I was going to do in the future. And they always used to say to me, Marilyn, you've got the most fantastic potential business because you're not left with stock every season. All you've got to sell is your brain. And that was absolutely right. I knew I had to hone my brain, be a good lawyer, go from there. But I know a lot of my dad.
So we go Chris at the end and then
Yeah, we haven't. This gets on to the question of business model innovation as well, which we haven't talked too much about. And there's a confluence between technology and business skills, which in other sectors have completely transformed the way they work. And I think an interesting question in legal services is whether at some point there comes a tipping point at which a new kind of business model enters and really does radically change things, or is it going to be more a case of incremental change? I think it's impossible to predict, but I'd be interested in people's perspectives on that.
Darryl, obviously you set up a bit of a different model. What's your thoughts?
So, I mean, I do hope it is doomed, actually, because I think it was 1985 the American lawyer started to publish profits per partner, and the large firms are just obsessed by profits per partner. It kind of seems immoral, actually, when they do that, but they are obsessed. So how can you get real innovation when they're only concerned with the profits they're going to make that year? So I think that is wrong, and I think the second part of that as well comes down to leadership. They vote in a managing partner by a manifesto approach or something like that. But as soon as they don't do what they want, as soon as the profits partner drop, they take the rug away and get rid of the managing partner. So there is no longevity, there is no long-term thinking by that model. So I actually do think it has to change, yes.
Could I just add one thing? And that is that you might be thinking, how did she happen to own a solely owned firm? And the answer to that is that when I offered partnership to people and when they had to put money into the firm, they didn't want to know. Risk averse is, I think, much more common now than it used to be. People are more risk averse. They don't want to put the money in. They want to get a certain defined salary structure, and they want to go home at the end of the day and know that their money is safe and on the go. Whereas when I set up, I took a second mortgage on my home to acquire my office and always had to take risks. But now it seems to me that a lot of people don't want to take risks. So I think you've got to factor that one in.
Jeremy, you had a point to add?
I think it ties together your question about how to change the ship and also potentially the future business model. I'm a huge advocate, and I think I say it, my team must be absolutely sick of it. I think all my managers are sick of it. I think our management committee is sick of it. But you could write this down or pay McKinsey £30 million for this advice. If you want change, you must reward the behaviors that you want. If you're rewarding the behaviors that are currently going on at the partnership level, at the associate level, in the business services side, and you're not getting the results, then you need to change the incentive structure. And that goes for associates, that goes for partners, that goes for senior management. And some businesses get this. I'm not sure many law firms do.
Sorry, yeah, do you want...
It's got to be real as well. It's got to be really honest.
Yeah.
It can't just be the rhetoric of we're changing and we think this is quite a good idea. It's got to be what we do around here is the culture. Quite often we'll say, well, we'll reduce our targets, but actually everyone's still doing 120% of target. If that's what we do around here, nothing's changing.
If you reward the number of hours that are billed, you get hourly billing. So, interestingly, in terms of structure, if you take the fundamental difference between a limited company, one of the greatest inventions in the world, and a partnership is an income-driven machine, a limited company is a capital growth machine. They're two different fundamental models. And both have advantages, both have disadvantages. And it comes down to how it's led and how it's... But, I think the partnership model is probably not fit for purpose going forward. But it will be for some organisations, which is fine. But I think as a generic, it will be actually not the partnership model that will succeed if you look over the next 10, 15 years. I think of the things that should go, apart from some of the language, it is hourly billing. It incentivises and drives the wrong behaviour. It transfers risk to the customer away from the supplier. I'm amazed. One of the things that amazed me coming to the legal market is it still survives. couldn't believe it. Because if you go to a fixed price model, and by the way, if you can do fixed pricing on the most complex construction projects in the world, I think you can do fixed price on a lot of the legal work that's out there. So I think what's fascinating, if you want to really change behavior, change the way you actually charge customers, because then it forces it back through the organization.
I clearly agree with Carl, because that's our model. We don't do timesheets, we have change. But I agree with that point. It's got to be real change. And I think there's so much aesthetics around it, trying, particularly larger firms, saying we are innovating and playing at it. I was talking to a young lawyer a couple of weeks ago who said, yes, we have flexible working. It's all through the HR handbooks, everything. We're all encouraged to do it. But actually, they don't really believe in it, because what they mean is after 9 o'clock and at the weekends. And if I come in having had a day at home working, I get mercilessly ribbed for have I had a bad night the night before or whatever it is. So that culture has really got to change, and it must come right from the top. It's the only way. It must come right from the top.
Just one quick kind of maybe comment to tie it all together. I think there's a tendency for, I mean, those of us that are in this industry to kind of look and say, here's all the things that we need to do, and there's all this change that needs to happen. But one of the things about lawyers as they come up through and eventually enter the partnership is that we kind of fail to recognize is that when they say they're building a practice, what they're actually doing is learning how to be an entrepreneur. And there are so many elements about building that practice which can be leveraged, I believe, into broader business skills, into a broader understanding of how to run a business and then a firm. So I guess I'm just conscious I don't want to seem to be that we're kind of being negative, because there's a lot of positives there.
Right, we've got about 10 minutes left, so I want to get through at least a couple more questions, and if I could ask panellists to try and keep their answers to short and sweet so we get through as many questions as we can and get the views. Any further questions for all? Yeah, the gentleman here at the front in the pink shirt. Yeah, it's, just there, put the microphone there, thank you.
Hi, I'm Niels Mackenzie from Mackenzie Law in Shrewsbury. I've just got a question. There seems possibly to be a tension on the one hand between being a trusted advisor and on a fixed price model, just because you don't know how needy the client is. And I was just wondering particularly how Marilyn and Darryl deal with that in their respective businesses.
How do you deal with the needy clients and that balance?
Two ways. First of all, on an emotional level, I always made it a rule, you don't befriend a client. You maintain a distance, a professional distance from the client. And eventually you get to be able to handle a client no matter how deeply upset and affected you might be. For example, a woman with cancer who's getting divorced, or somebody whose child has been abducted abroad. Those things are very difficult to deal with. So on an emotional level, you have to maintain a professional distance. But also from a charging perspective, you've got to take a view. And one of the main arguments against fixed prices, particularly in family law, well, how long's a piece of string? How do you know the twists and turns and whatever? And sometimes you come across fixed fee cases where people have radically, drastically overcharged. They've charged the full whack for the fee and settled the case very quickly. So you just wonder sometimes, is there an incentive there to settle as fast as possible to get as much money as possible? And therefore the argument there, you can be criticised for doing that. Or what happens if you overshoot in terms of time what your estimate was or your quote was for a fixed fee. So I don't think fixed fees are necessarily the answer, and I wasn't attracted by it for those two reasons.
Yeah, no.
I think there's a confusion. We shouldn't get it. I don't think fixed fees means cheap fees. I think it just means certainty of pricing. And when we first started, I remember talking to one CEO who said, I've no problem with my decorator coming to my house and charging by the hour of the half day. He starts at 8 o'clock, he finishes at 4:30. My wife's there making cups of coffee, know exactly what he's doing. But when my lawyer does it, I've no idea who's on the golf course, in meetings, who's doing the work. And when he comes back and says, I've done 25 hours more, he says there's no integrity in it whatsoever, and I just don't trust them. And I think that is very common for how business look at law firms. I think what fixed fees does, what certainty of fees does, it gives that integrity at the outset to really work out what needs to be done, to work out the value that you're going to deliver, agree a price with your client, and then it creates efficiency. You know, you don't do 4 drafts if 2 drafts will do. You don't have meetings if meetings are unnecessary. You manage the other side much better than you do. And I think it actually creates much more value. You can create much more value, and you can probably earn much more money. I think it's interesting in this country, why do our QCs earn 5, 6, 7, 8 million a year? The reason they do that is not because they're charging on fixed fees, they're delivering real value, and that's what clients are paying for. So you have to give a lot more thought to it, but ultimately I think you have a much happier clients as a result of it.
Let's try and get 1 or 2 more questions before we close up the session. Any other ones out there? Okay, I'll have a follow-up question. We've sort of touched on it a bit, but a lot of this might seem a bit scary to people and a bit like, well, where do I start? I'm a high street solicitor. I've got so much going on. What practical advice would you give for a smaller firm that is thinking, I want to improve, I want to keep up, I want to make sure my business is sustainable, but AI and tech just seems something that's just a world away from where I am? What would your advice be to them?
Actually, to answer both your question and the last question, I think one of the things you can do is just get a handle on your data. And when I say data, I mean anything like your timekeeping records, standardizing your narratives. Look at it from the perspective of analysis for later, rather than I've just got to get something down. One thing that you can do with your time records, for example, is that rather than one fixed fee, you can segment. So you're looking at chunks of work. And some of those chunks of work, actually over time, when you analyze them, you'll figure out, wow, there's actually, it's pretty consistent. This takes me 4 hours every time I do it. Then those other chunks that'll be, one was 50, the other one was 2.5. And then you can start chunking it out. Menu, think of it like a menu. You're a 10-course menu.
And if you don't know that, you're going to struggle for your business to be sustainable, aren't you? Because if you don't know how long something is likely to take, how can you have a business model that works, presumably?
The last time we were together, Carl, I think you said something about measurement.
Absolutely.
And I think it goes to the whole data piece. If you can get a handle on what your data is, think about how you're going to analyze it, then what was the line? Something measure.
Yeah, Carl, tell us the line.
Yeah, well, the whole thing about it is you get what you measure. And I think one of the key things that you've referenced is data. You've all got data. So use the data you've got to actually tell you the story. They'll tell you stories. And it's actually learning from those stories, which I think are really important. I think the answer to the specific question is, actually, do you know what we're all bad at doing, but it's actually worth its weight in gold? If there's one thing you should do, you should actually find a half day or a day to get away with yourself and whoever your key colleagues are, and you should ask the question, what business are we actually in? What do customers value and what will they actually therefore pay for? How are we organized to deliver that? And can we deliver it profitably? And would we organize ourselves in a different way if we were starting from scratch? One of the things we used to, every year, for all the businesses I've ever been involved in 25 years, every year we took away the senior management team, and the opening sentence was, we've all been fired. What we're now going to do is we're now going to create a business from scratch which kills our existing business. What does it look like? And I tell you what was fascinating by doing that, people start saying, yeah, why do we do it this way? We shouldn't be doing it this way. We should be doing it that way. Right, well, why aren't we doing it that way? Let's make sure we do it. So I think just find the space to actually have the luxury to think about what business you're in and then make decisions based on that.
Talking of killing your business, I am curious to know what happened with your pub and what did you learn, Daryl?
A lot, actually, because actually you get your cash at the end of the night, so you know how well you've done. So, but I learned to be innovative. I mean, that was the thing. We were very, very different, very competitive market. And I think, so going back to this question, I think the thing that is absolutely key, and there is nothing else, and that's obsessive client service. The first rule is obsessive client service. The second rule is there is no second rule. So you have to work out what that is. When you go to to buy a room in a hotel, there's basic things that you expect: a bed, sheets on the bed, etc. There's certain things that you expect: an ensuite or a TV in the room. And then there's the wow factors that make you go back and back and back. And that's the service. And I think you really have to sit down and say, what is the service that we're delivering? What is it the client wants? And how do we differentiate ourselves from the other firms? That to me, is the real key.
Marilyn, do you want to add something?
Just a thought to a high street firm. Are you on the right high street? Who are your clients? Where are they based? Analyse data. I totally endorse everything everybody said. But I'd also ask the question, are you in the right place? Do you need to be in another high street where your clients might find you more attractive? And the other point I would say is local marketing can be invaluable. Don't assume that national marketing is the requisite. Local marketing can pay dividends and does.
Okay, well, we've hit 11 o'clock. I think that's been a brilliant panel session. I want to thank all the panellists. If we give them a round of applause, thank you. We've got a 20-minute break now. There'll be coffees outside. Just a couple of quick things. One, the SRA's got a